Um, so a little bit about myself. I'm a Basque American born in Salt Lake City, Utah. My father was American of German descent, but my mother was born in Iparralde in a small village and came here in the 50s. Uh, Ever since my father died when I was young, and I became involved with the Basque community here in Salt Lake City first, and soon moved on to being a delegate to North American Basque organizations, and have been involved on and off with NABO, and also by playing music. I play Basque music. I'm a musician and play accordion. I've been able to be involved in many different events throughout the whole Basque diaspora here in the United States. And because I've been lucky enough to speak Basque, French, and Spanish as well as English, I've been able to meet and talk to many, many members of those individual clubs and know what their views are, more or less, of different things, whether it be politics, the Basque Country, NABO, and different items, not just culturally, but other ways as well. Iñaki approached me to write a little bit about the view of Euskal Herria as a whole, from the point of view of the North American Basque organizations. But I also thought I could give a little bit more personal view of people that are not Basque and how they see Euskal Herria. So I made my paper the title, Euskal Herria, USA, Evolution and Future Relationship, the view from the North American Basque organizations, and a more personal view on what Euskal Herria represents to NABO as a whole, to the average member of a NABO club, and to the average American citizen in the present-day United States. And I'm going to apologize now. I pronounce it NABO. I know that's kind of an interesting word for some of you, but that's how we always grew up saying it. So I'm going to apologize in advance for the use of that term. As many of you may know, NABO is an organization that is comprised of other Basque organizations as members. From NABO's website, it is described thusly: NABO was founded with the intent of combining the resources of Basque American organizations to preserve and promote the Basque heritage. We are not a standalone organization that accepts individuals as members. Instead, our members are Basque entities or clubs that have formed locally and then joined us. We now count nearly 40 entities, and we are always looking for more members, because that means that Basques are getting together in their own area to form new clubs. So, by definition, NABO owes its existence to the fact that Basques who have immigrated from Euskal Herria to the United States and their descendants have found it important enough to create organizations to gather and socialize on one hand, but that also work to maintain, preserve, and promote the Basque culture on the other. Continuing on in that vein, these organizations also found it important enough to create a larger organization that works to do the same thing on a national and even international level. Why is this important in the context of this seminar's discussions? Because the root of all these organizations and where we are today is the Basque, who emigrated here from Euskal Herria. And what does this mean? It means that almost every member of every organization that belongs to NABO has a direct connection to Euskal Herria, whether they themselves came from there, or their father or mother came from there, or perhaps even a more distant relative like a grandmother or grandfather. But regardless, if they belong to a member organization of NABO, the odds are that they have a direct connection to Euskal Herria. But again, what does this mean? In my observation over the years, there exist roughly 4 types of Basques in our communities here in the United States. First are the movers and shakers, the founders of NABO and our clubs, and not just the ones who are or were on the boards of directors of the clubs, but also the ones who have dedicated most of their spare time to the preservation of our culture by teaching dancing, pilota, mus, euskera, and so on. But not only those, the ones who cook at every picnic or party, the ones who are always there to set up and tear down and clean up for every gathering. They know they are Basque, and they have a profound love of Basque culture, and most of them have a good knowledge of Euskal Herria, where it is and what it is, and along with that, a profound love for it. They have been the key to the success of individual clubs, and by extension, the success of NABO. The second group of Basques that I find in our communities are those who know they are Basque, more than likely belong to one of the organizations, or at least attend the events, and will work at an event or volunteer to help if asked or approached to do so. Most of this group also identify strongly with being Basque, have a direct ancestor that emigrated from Euskal Herria, and have knowledge of the homeland and maybe have even been there on vacation, but just don't feel as strongly about spending all of their free time promoting the culture and working for the local Basque organization, but are still proud of being Basque and more than likely have a lauburu trivet or some other decoration in their kitchen to show their pride. The third group is yet still more removed. They know they are Basque and have a direct ancestor who emigrated from Euskal Herria, but their participation in the maintenance of the Basque culture is limited to maybe going to the local Basque picnic once a year or going to dinner at a local Basque restaurant and recounting stories to their children about their grandfather or great-grandmother, but they generally don't belong to the clubs and participate minimally in the club's events outside of picnics. The fourth group is the most removed, and even though they know they are of Basque descent and have an ancestor who emigrated from Euskal Herria, they know little about their culture and Euskal Herria other than that, and rarely participate in Basque events except possibly out of curiosity. What this all means, though, is that most of the people who are involved at the NABO level generally fall into the first two groups, and so have a love and knowledge of Basque culture, and by extension, Euskal Herria, either having been born there, having traveled there, or having read about it and having heard stories about it from others. So from the point of view of NABO, Euskal Herria is a real, tangible place, and also our homeland, where our roots are, and where we can find the source of much of our mores and character. But which Euskal Herria is this? Is this the modern day Euskal Herria that exists in the collective memories? Is this the modern day Euskal Herria that exists in the collective memories of the NABO delegates or of the average club member? Is this the urbanized Euskal Herria that now specializes in cutting edge technologies in the IT world that helped put the present Mars rover in action on the red planet? Is this the Euskal Herria that has large commercial farming in the south and world-class wineries? Is this the Euskal Herria that has more Michelin star restaurants than any other comparable region in the world? Is this the Euskal Herria that has become a bucket list destination for any serious surfer in the world? I think not. For good or for bad, the Euskal Herria of the collective memories of most of the NABO delegates and officers, along with most of the members of the individual clubs, is the Euskal Herria of the Baseri and the fishing village, the idyllic, almost mythical storybook paradise that our parents and grandparents have told us about in their stories and the recounting of their childhood years. Due to economic hardship or political reasons, they came here to find a better life during a time that Euskal Herria in many ways was a backwater, although not in the industrialized areas at the time, but a place that they left to make a better life for themselves. Some parts of Euskal Herria were always ahead of the curve in industry, such as the famous steel of Bilbao and the cooperative movement of Mondragon and others. But with the promise of good money in the Americas, many chose to emigrate there rather than move to the large, urbanized, dirty cities in search of a better job. At least in the United States, it seemed they would be working in open country with animals, no crowds of people, no pollution, and with a network of Basques already there for support. The ones they left behind, sisters and brothers, mothers and fathers, nieces and nephews, all enterprising Basques, were the ones that developed Euskal Herria into what it is today, once the yoke of fascism and the repression of the Iparralde region by Paris was lifted, and a portion of the taxes gathered from the citizens of the regions was allowed to remain there as an investment in the economies and futures of those regions. With the tenacity and enterprising spirits of the Basque people, Euskal Herria blossomed into a worldwide center for technology and modern industry, while their brothers and sisters and cousins were living their lives in the United States in the old rural or small town ways. Although most of the Basque immigrants that came to the United States with that same tenacity, industriousness, and enterprising spirit ended up being successes in their own right, many becoming sheep owners rather than sheep herders, many more starting their own businesses in other fields and utilizing modern technologies as they came along, they still clung to that memory of the pastoral and idyllic Euskal Herria when passing their traditions on to their children and grandchildren. That, to me, is the view of most of the members of NABO and its constituent clubs when one speaks of Euskal Herria. Some of us do know of the progress and successes in the fields of industry and technology, and most of us know about the Guggenheim Museum, the amazing cleanup of Bilbao, and the culinary success of Donostia and Euskal Herria as a whole. Many know the success of Athletic Bilbao and other professional teams at Euskal Herria, and some even realize their place as some of the best in the world. But few know of many of the other advances and successes in Euskal Herria that makes it one of the world-class centers of innovation in many fields. Now, one exception is the new diaspora. There's a new wave of immigration from Euskal Herria that one finds in more urban communities, such as the San Francisco Bay Area, the Los Angeles Basin, and the greater New York area, among many others. This new diaspora is made up of young, educated Basques from Euskal Herria who have come to work in the technology and information fields or other industries. Yes, these immigrants know well the Euskal Herria of today, since they were and are a part of it and grew up in it. But these immigrants in large part also have a disconnect from the previous immigrant population, having little in common with them and mostly having different ideas of what being Basque is and what they enjoy participating in for diversion. They generally come to a couple of events out of curiosity, but usually do not hang around very long and almost never join the clubs, let alone become involved with the clubs. So most of the time influence the outlook of most members minimally, if at all. There are some obvious exceptions, such as the New York Club and the Washington, D.C. Club, but these instances are rare and even have led to upheavals, such as what the New York Club is going through presently. So what does the future hold for relationships between NABO and Euskal Herria? Let's again turn to the NABO's website, where in their mission statement they say, recreation plus education equals perpetuation. NABO is a service organization to member clubs that does not infringe upon the autonomy of each member. NABO's function is to promote and preserve cultural, civic, and social interests and activities of the Basque people, to cultivate understanding and friendship, to educate and enlighten the public in matters relating to the Basque people, and to promote and advance open communication and exchanges among Basques living in North America and the Basque Country and diaspora. So you can see that the main focus of NABO is mostly the preservation of our culture, and as discussed above, that is the culture of our parents and grandparents. In this case, NABO becomes a great platform to meet members of the Basque communities of the diaspora, and many of the movers and shakers, as discussed before, as many who serve at the NABO level are passionate in their love for the Basque people and Basque culture. But unless someone was approaching them with a proposal for something cultural, anything past that using NABO as a way to meet people would be an exercise in futility. The organization is vehemently anti-political, so anything that might be in support of something political would not even be allowed at the meeting. There is an existing relationship between NABO and the government of Euskadi, but even that is tenable, and there are many who are still in opposition to that at the club level. And great care is taken not to favor any of the political parties that are involved at that level. In addition, to keep some semblance of fairness and openness, NABO has reached out to the government of Navarra and to the regional authorities in Iparralde, and although there is not regular dialogue like there is with the government of Euskadi, there is some communication. The same goes for business and sports. NABO is not really set up, nor does it have the resources to promote business interests, including tourism. People have come to the meetings over the years to promote their cause and to pass out information, but again, outside of being one of the best places to meet the movers and shakers of our diaspora, little would come to fruition if one were wanting to promote commerce or trade. Sports as well, outside of promoting Basque sports as part of Basque culture, such as pilota and herri kirolat, most other sports promotion has to happen privately, such as the visits by Athletic and the Baigorri Garasi rugby team. This brings us to the second part of this paper, the view of Euskal Herria from non-Basque American standpoint. For many years as I was growing up, the only reference to Basque people that was in the mainstream media was that there was a terrorist group that would set off bombs or kill people once in a while in Europe. Whenever I would tell someone that I was Basque, that was the first question. Was I a terrorist? Needless to say, I had a long explanation memorized that I would use as a response whenever that would come up. Now, if you had been lucky enough to grow up in a community where there were many Basques, such as Boise, Idaho, or Elko, Nevada, then people would know you as a sheep herder, regardless of whether your family had been sheep or not. The one good thing about growing up in these areas is that the Basque people were also known to be hardworking, honest, and trustworthy, although this was not the case a century before when anyone involved in the sheep industry was looked down upon, and the Basques were known as black Bascos in some areas, dirty, untrustworthy, and only here in the U.S. to make money and to return home with it. Things have definitely come a long way. Luckily, in these more modern times, people are much more educated, well-read, and world-savvy. Basques are world-renowned for their cuisine, including here in the United States. And along with that, The wines from Euskal are very well known here as well. As more and more people have access to news and information from almost everywhere and anywhere, and have become interested in multiculturalism and have a more global view, the fact that Euskera is not related to any other language in the world and the enigma of the origins of the Basques have also become hot topics in many circles. Many of those who enjoy traveling also have Euskal on their bucket list, whether it be for a culinary experience or to attend the Encierros of San Fermin, or maybe a soccer game at San Mamés Stadium, or a trip along the Camino de Santiago, starting in Euskal Herria. Euskal Herria has become a destination for many, many world travelers. In addition, in the sports world, many, many people are familiar with Euskal Herria, starting with the huge worldwide fan base that Athletic presently enjoys, but in more specialized areas as well. Anyone who is an avid surfing fan knows of the great waves around Mundaka and the famous Velara waves of Biarritz. Whether they watch the world-class competitions held there or actually save money to one day go there and hang 10, Euskal Herria is well known for its surfing. Also, in the bicycling world, Euskal Herria has consistently produced well-known world bicycling champions. And also, the Orbea brand is well known in the bicycling world as being one of the best bicycles in the world, produced with cutting-edge technology, not only for tour racing, but also for BMX and off-road mountain bike racing. Also well known as Hialeah, which although it has suffered a decline in recent years, still has a following, and most people in the United States know that it is a Basque game. This is among other sports where Basques have recently excelled and made a name for themselves here in the United States, such as golf, snowboarding, and even mountain climbing. In the area of science, business, and industry, I must say that the average American citizen knows little of the importance of Euskal Herria in these fields. There are many Basque firms doing business in the United States, but because they tend not to play up the fact that they are from Euskal Herria, most people do not know that they are Basque. For example, here in Salt Lake City, we have a light train system for public transportation, and over half the cars for the system were made by a Basque company, although few people know that Euskal Herria is one of the centers of the world for train car production. I also just saw this morning that a Basque furniture company was going to open a new factory in Alabama this year. I do know of several Basque startups in Silicon Valley and other tech centers around the United States as well, but the majority of Americans do not know that these are Basque companies. The same goes for science. Few people know that there was a Basque, few people know that some Basque scientists worked on the Mars rover that is on Mars right now. Few people know that there was a Basque astronaut that went into space a few years ago. Few people know of the other cutting-edge technologies that have been developed in Euskal Herria and that are in use today here in the United States, and that is a pity, mostly because the fact that it all gets lumped together, and if anything is mentioned at all, it is usually that they are Spanish technologies or Spanish companies. So what can we do to improve this outlook? Depending on where people want to go with this in the future, and depending on which realm we are talking about, sports, business, culture, etc., NAVO is definitely a resource to meet people and possibly get headed in the right direction. But that's only if you are looking for connection with people of the diaspora itself. If someone would be looking for connections on a larger scale, for example, in commerce or sports or something like that, it seems that it would be beneficial to have an office, even several offices strategically located in different areas of the United States that would be staffed with people whose sole purpose would be to create and extend existing ties between Euskal Herria and the United States. People who had good knowledge of both Euskal Herria and the United States with the knowledge of the different languages and good people skills and would promote the brand of Euskal Herria. I know that that exists to a certain level with people representing the government of Euskadi, but something larger might be called for. It would seem to me that if some private organizations came together to set up an office or some offices to promote all the regions of Euskal Herria and keep it non-political, that could serve to promote all the various interests of the regions equally better than anything that presently exists and better than going through NAVO, especially in areas other than cultural ones.